Well, thank you so much, Kat. While you just take a glass of water and take a breath, I just want to say thank you for a fascinating chat. There's been much discussion in the chat. I have to say, Chris Nicholson says it's Extinction Eyes. Nikita says it's Extinctify, and somebody called Helen Arney says Extincticate.
Okay.
I think the actual word is extirpate, but you know we can crowdsource some of the other suggestions as well. Eradicate, I think, is the one.
I'm doing this on the fly. You can tell that I haven't actually written this talk because
it's been fantastic. So I've got a whole pile of questions which I'm going to try and wrap through as many as we can before our time is up. Quick one right at the start from Ricardo, who asks, the title reminds me of One Renegade Cell, one of the best books I've ever read, which is by Robert Weinberg, in case people don't know it. Where did your title come from? Now, I thought the title was a reference to Rebel Yell by, is it Billy Idol? I think it's Billy Idol.
Yeah, it's a very slight sort of nod to that. Actually, if you're very observant, there are a few music references scattered through the book. So if anyone can spot them, a prize for you. There is a Pixies reference in there, and there is a Catatonia reference in there somewhere. So if you can find them, you're very clever. So the original title for this book was Selfish Monsters. So it was this idea that in the Cambrian explosion, which is a time in deep time when suddenly like life just went woof in this massive burst of evolutionary innovation, and all this genetic diversity arose, and all these sort of species were just evolving like a rate of knots on the floor of the Cambrian Ocean. And the evolutionary biologist Richard Goldschmidt called these hopeful monsters. Most of these evolutionary innovations did not go anywhere. They were very, very, some really strange animals, like your worst nightmare kind of stuff. But then some of them became the species we have today. And so I thought this idea of cancer as a selfish monster, as this sort of wild evolutionary process that's ultimately selfish because it does take over and destroy the body that it arises in. And for lots of various reasons, that just seemed a bit too niche and complicated. So it was then the idea of like sort of the cheating cell, and then Athena brought her book out, which is called The Cheating Cell. And I'm like, oh, nuts, I'm gonna have to think of a different one. I thought like Rebel Cell, it sounds a bit cooler, because these are cells that kind of rebelling against the rules of the cellular society.
So a couple of people asked about other organisms that aren't animals and plants. So Thomas Shaw asked, do bacteria and fungi get cancer? And Garth Wilkinson says, would unicellular creatures like amoeba get cancer?
I mean, you can. It's interesting. So do bacteria get cancer? I did have a little bit about this in the book, but I think it did not survive the edit. It's like, so cancer is a sort of a mammalian disease is described. You have a benign tumor, which is something that doesn't really break through the boundaries that are within the tissues of your body. We have these boundaries called the basement membrane, which is sort of keeps all your stuff in the right place in various bits of your organs. And we define a cancer as something that has started to break through that membrane. And obviously, if you're unicellular, you can't have that. But you can get populations of bacteria that have genetic changes that make them grow unusually fast or make them do sort of slightly strange things. In terms of fungi and plants, you do see what we could call tumors in plants. You can see like things like galls, and you do see like weird lumps and bumps on trees. Those are usually caused by the actions of insects, but it's still creating that generation of cells. But plants and fungi, they have really hard cell walls, so it's their cells are not as kind of squidgy and motile as ours. So certainly like soft bodies, like mammalian bodies and all the other sort of species that I talked about. If you have like a soft multicellular body, then your cells can start going around on the move.
My body's very soft and multicellular, I'm afraid.
We all are.
So Eric Vinkier asked an interesting question, which I also wanted to know the answer to, but maybe that's because I wasn't paying attention, which says sort of how pervasive are the DNA differences in a single body, like a single human? Is it only cancer if they start to multiply beyond normal replacement growth? So he says it's not surprising that obviously cells are being copied and whatever all the time, replicated all the time. So it's not surprising there are some errors, but sort of do you have a percentage, or do you have a sort of...
So I think, I mean, certainly talking to the Sanger people, certainly by the time you get to middle age, like half your cells have some kind of what we would classify as a mutation in them. So there are lots of genes that we define as what we'd call cancer drivers. So these are genetic changes that we have found associated with cancer. And it does like make us think about, well, what's our definition of a cancer driver? If it's like a mutation that's found in cancer cells, now we're starting to find these driver mutations in healthy cells as well. So it's like, I probably need to think a bit more about that, especially if you're going to start targeting them with drugs. Yeah. So the answer is that there's a lot of mutation in the body. But what really makes a cancer, and actually, you know, you could probably think about it, that we know from things like autopsy studies, most people have many, many, many like little tumors in them that would never grow into a cancer and never cause them problems. And there's sort of an argument about how much should we start screening people for looking for tiny, tiny cancers, because like, you don't want to know what's in there. There's probably sorts of things in there that would never necessarily develop into a full-blown cancer. So what really makes cells start going for it is this chromosomal instability. So there's some problems that mean that they end up like multiplying their chromosomes. There's a problem in division. They end up with extra sets of chromosomes. Chromosomes can get twisted, shattered, stitched back together again. Things start to get really weird. And that is really powerful fuel for evolution. So it looks like that's the kind of the leap from this sort of, you know, clones expanding and like, you know, expansionist ideas to actually like, wow, we've already got some stuff here. We're really going for it.
So based on this kind of increasing mutations in older people, Bhavika Chathani asks, is this, you know, this patchwork of mutations seen in older people, is that the reason behind genetic disorders are more commonly seen in babies born to older women? Because, you know, the older you are, the more your cells have developed mutations, therefore the cells you pass on to your child will have developed mutations. Is that right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. It's not really the area that I know a lot about. Certainly with things like the chromosome non-disjunction disorders, things like Down syndrome, where you end up with an extra chromosome. Because all the eggs that you have, if you're a female, all the eggs that you have were laid down when you were a fetus in your mother's womb, and they're just there. And, you know, your eggs are sort of in this state of like suspended division, waiting to be ovulated. And so the longer they're sticking around, the longer you can sort of, things get stuck together. And also, yeah, the older you are, the more likely you are to have picked up genetic changes. But yeah, it's not my exact area, and I don't really know the literature on like what that rate is like, but that would be my speculation.
I did forget to include a disclaimer at the start, which I don't think was necessary, which is that I'm not a doctor and Kat is a doctor, but not that kind of doctor. I'm
not that kind of doctor, no. I can't do medical things.
Please do see your GP if you do have any more personal questions about cancer. Tak Tay and actually Kathy Livingston both asked kind of similar questions. Remember when you had that slide up about halfway through, which had the kind of prevalence of cancer by age? And that was a slide for all cancers. You might take ages to bring it up again, so let's not bother. But Dave said, what about childhood cancers? But so is there anything in the cancers of young people or young cells or the genetics about young people?
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably something you didn't have time to include, right?
Yeah, so childhood cancers are very, very different from adult cancers. And there is a section in the book where I specifically address that, because I'm mostly focusing on this process of the evolution of cancer as we age. Childhood cancers are, the best way of thinking about them is sort of a remnant of development that's kind of gone wrong. So yeah, my background is I'm a developmental biologist because I'm fascinated by this process of how you go from one cell to make a baby. You have this huge profusion of cell division and cells specializing into all the different tissues of the body. And childhood cancers, most of the solid tumors, seem to be that there's cells that somehow have got to a certain point in that developmental journey, and then due to a mutation that kind of came with them. So I'm not talking about necessarily external mutation or anything like that. This is like internal genetic changes that happen to be in those cells, that they have somehow got stuck on that developmental pathway and then start to kind of grow in an aberrant way. And that's where you get really specific types of childhood cancer. So Wilms tumor is a specific type of kidney cancer that affects a really specific age group. So these cancers are really weirdly specific to the age and the tissue, because they are cells that have started on a developmental journey got to a certain point and gone wrong. The childhood blood cancers are slightly different. It seems to be the chap called Mel Greaves at the Institute of Cancer Research is the real expert on this, and you should get him to do a talk. But yeah, it looks like the childhood leukemias, you need a sort of a genetic component that's inherited or has arisen sort of as a de novo mutation, and then some kind of exposure to infection or not exposure to enough infection. So it's sort of the combination of something in the childhood immune system and immune responses plus an underlying genetic change. So that's sort of a slightly different process.
So just for everyone out there, I appreciate it's 8:30 UK time. So you can switch off now if you're bored, but I'm going to carry on for another 5 or 10 minutes if that's okay, Kat, because I've got so many good questions. I want to do at least, a third of them.
This tells me I need to reduce the length of my
So another really interesting question that both Elsa Turner and Garth Wilkinson were saying was basically, now that we've got these techniques of gene editing and genetic manipulation techniques, I mean, presumably these are now being looked at to kind of arrest the development of these cancers or otherwise try and solve things.
Everyone gets really, really excited about CRISPR and we can use it to cure cancer. It's like, well, how are you going to get every cancer cell in the body and change it, right? That approach does not work. And that's the fundamental problem with a lot of the gene therapy ideas, is like, you've just got to get this stuff into every cell that you need to change. Where CRISPR and like the latest techniques are really exciting is in the area of immunotherapy. So there's two sorts of immunotherapies. These are drugs that use the power of the immune system to seek out and destroy cancer cells. So some of these drugs, they sort of interfere with like the kind of the recognition between cancer cells and immune cells. So cancer cells hide from the immune system, and these drugs enable them to be revealed to the immune system. The other type of immunotherapy is using immune cells that have been kind of trained in some way to find cancer cells and destroy them. So there are these cells called CAR T cells. So T cells are like the killers of the immune system. And this is really exciting, the idea that you could use CRISPR to genetically modify these CAR T cells to turn them into like cancer-fighting killer cells. And there's so much interest in this. It's such a hot field. So it's certainly one to watch, but at the moment I think they're only being tested in quite a limited number of cancers. I think the blood cancers, certainly, because again, you've got to get these cells in there, and they've got to find the cancer cells and destroy them.
So another question, again, about a kind of hot topic that's been really big in sort of popular biology in the last sort of 5 or 10 years. Tom Thatcher asks, I'm given to understand that generally speaking, the body is best considered an ecosystem due to the proper function being dependent on non-human cells, so like gut bacteria and that's so forth. So how do you consider the microbiome when you're looking at these obviously evolutionary things in our cells, but there are loads of other cells in our body that aren't us?
Yeah, so I did touch on this a little bit, because the microbiome, it's super hot, and really interesting. And there's definitely evidence that the gut microbiome influences response to cancer therapy, so to immunotherapy and to chemotherapy as well. So it really is having an influence on the body. And I think more broadly, that's what I want to get out of, is this mindset that cancer is just about the cancer cells and just about the genetic changes in the cancer cells. It's about the body as a system, as an ecology. An ecosystem is exactly the right word. We need to understand the tissue landscape. We need to understand the hormonal soup of the body and how that changes through life and how that changes in different people. We need to understand the influence of the body clock and our circadian rhythms, of the bacteria that live in and on us. And it's kind of a bit of a wanky word, but I really like the word holistic, and I'm really annoyed that it's been taken away by the kind of the sort of woo-woo sort of world. It's like, it's holistic. It's like, we need a holistic understanding of this as a disease of a system of systems in the body, like as an emerging complex system within a complex system, rather than just like a group of cells that have got mutations and we just need to like take them out.
So I think it's probably time to draw things to a little bit of a close. There was quite a nice question that was slightly unrelated, which was, I've lost the question now. Oh, terrible. Actually, there was one question by Siuan Lee, which was again a nice question to finish on, where she asks about doing natural sciences at Cambridge, which I've done as well. I hated it and wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but you might have a different opinion, Kat.
I loved it. So I did natural sciences. I went to Selwyn for my degree and Keys for my PhD, and I loved the natural sciences tripos. I did like a real heck and mix. I did cell biology, I did chemistry, I did physiology. I was made to do maths. It was bad. But yeah, doing chemistry, doing pharmacology, biochemistry, all these things. It was a really sort of broad grounding in life sciences. And certainly actually the chemistry has proved to be really, really useful, surprisingly so, just an understanding of how molecules work, because all of biology is just molecules. Turns out if you go down far enough, you actually sort of hit physics and maths at the bottom of it. So I don't go down there. But understanding biology and chemistry and thinking more broadly about the kind of the systems, I think it's a very good grounding. And if you get in and if you're going there, good luck. And I hope you get there. Someday we're allowed to go back to universities.
And I'll just chip in and be slightly more positive, which is that I did go there and I thought I wanted to do physics and chemistry, but it turns out they're really, really difficult and hard and full of maths.
Oh, yeah.
It's awful, but still massively interesting. So actually what was good about the tripos system, I will say, is the fact that it does allow you to switch and change and still be part of the natural sciences. So I switched to do history and philosophy of science and actually really enjoyed it, and that was brilliant. So yeah, you might go to university with your idea that you're going to be one thing, but actually the good thing about natural sciences is you can sort of find your way, and suddenly you might have never thought about geology or material science or some other niche area of science that you don't do at school. And actually what's great about natural science is that you can sort of find yourself being a chemical engineer that you never thought you were going to be or something. So and just one final question from Sanya Kumdani, where she says, a bit of a personal question, but how did you find that your journey to understanding this counterintuitive approach to dealing with this issue that hurts so many people? Was it difficult to accept? Because obviously it's a very emotional issue. Loads of people have a personal relationship with cancer. So how did you kind of deal with those sensitivities around talking about what's a really, difficult and tragic subject?
Yeah, it's odd, and I do sometimes think I've got a bit too much of the detachment. So I was at Cancer Research UK for 12 years, and you learn to have to try and detach, but also remember that everything, behind every it's all got people behind it, and we respond to these things in an emotional way. You can't just be purely rational about it. And I've got some stories of people that I know and friends in the book who spoke to me and shared their stories. And it's you have to remember that this is an intensely human disease, but also it's a fascinating and a terrible biological process that is intrinsically part of us, and I think we really need to actually know it better. And there's a wonderful quote, I think it's a Marie Curie quote, or it's been sort of slightly bastardized, but it's we only fear things we don't understand, and so now is the time to really understand that we should fear less. And I don't want to get cancer, I don't want anyone I love to get cancer, but I feel like I understand a bit more about it having gone through this journey. And again, I'd hope if you read the book that you would have more of at least an appreciation and an understanding of really where it comes from.
Wow. Oh, that's a fascinating and excellent point to end on. I just want to apologise first by saying that Siuan Lee, I misgendered. I'm sorry, you are a male and not a female. My ignorance with Chinese names is awful, and I'm very sorry. Just to close tonight's event, just a final reminder that if you want to be a member of the RI, just like Albert Einstein was, you can sign up today for a low price. I think it's £70-something a year, and you'll be helping to support a fantastic 221-year-old science organisation. If not, you can please donate us £10 through the Just Giving link. And also, please do get yourself a copy of Kat's book if you want to find out more about the fascinating work she's been doing. If you don't have any money, do please fill in the post-event survey, because that'll help us know lots more about who's watching our videos and who likes the streams and what streams we can do for you in future. Just to let you know again, we've got Martin Rees's talk rescheduled for Thursday, and then we've also got Katie Mack telling you about the end of the universe next Tuesday. That's kind of it for me. Did you want to give out your book website and plug it one more time, Kat?
Yeah, go to rebelcellbook.com. The book launches on Thursday, so if you all pre-order it, it might get in the charts, and then my mum and dad will be really, really proud of me. rebelsellbook.com, and you can also buy signed book plates, because I am really, really sad that I can't be there in person to meet you all, to talk to you, to put my name in your book. So that's the closest thing I've got. And thank you so much for your attention. I'm sorry I went on for so long, but thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you very much, Kat, and good night, everyone. Take care. Good night.